36 years of impeccable reputation, certificates of honor, respect from colleagues, and at the same time, 2 decades of the same complaints from students that were never heard. This is a story about how a person can exist for years in 2 realities simultaneously. In one, she's an exemplary educator, and in another, the one whom students fear to the point of trembling. Village of Alexandrovskoye, Stavropol Territory, Secondary School Number 2. Valentina Ivanovna Noumivakina taught mathematics here from the very beginning of her career and remained until retirement age. Honorary Worker of General Education of Russia. Colleagues characterized her as a literate, strong teacher, yes, demanding. But is that bad? Her students really knew the subject. Parents entrusted their own to her. Class after class, generation after generation. School director Lyubov Tumakova would later tell journalists, Valentina Ivanovna worked with us for 36 years and did not conflict with anyone. She had no problems with Vanya either. 36 years is, in essence, a whole lifetime. Graduations, medalists, gratitude, methodological developments, teachers' councils, everything as it should be, everything like a good teacher. And if you look at her career from the outside, then before us is an exemplary biography of a person who dedicated herself to the profession, who remained working in a small village when she could have left, and who led her students from the 5th grade to graduation. And then, on January 30th, 2008, something happened in this village that made the whole country learn the name of Valentina Noumivakina, and learn it not at all in the way she probably would have liked. The door to the apartment was unlocked, and this was the first thing Marina Chernikova noticed when she returned from work on January 30th. She worked in the accounting department of the district education department, meaning she knew practically everyone in the local system. All the teachers, all the directors, all the names, and all the faces. Vanya lay on the floor. 9th grade. His face bore the dark marks of the incident. Next to him were empty blisters from medication, drotaverine, a common painkiller found in every medicine cabinet. As would be established later, he took a critical amount. He was already silent. Next to him lay a piece of paper and a mobile phone. The ambulance arrived quickly because the village is small and distances are short. But it was too late. The doctors recorded the time, called the police, and began the examination. The phone was seized immediately, and there was a video recording on it. Vanya recorded it shortly before swallowing the contents of the packages. He looked into the camera and spoke calmly, addressing his parents. The note was also seized. Just a few lines, the handwriting steady. He clearly did not rush when he wrote. Marina did not yet know what was written there at that moment. She only saw her son on the floor, empty packages, and the marks on his face. Investigators watched the video that same night and read the note. And the next day, something began in the village of Alexandrovskoye that no one expected, because there was a name in the note. One specific name. The note was short. No explanations, no details, no backstory, just one line. In what happened to me, I ask you to blame Valentina Ivanovna. The investigators reread it several times. Valentina Ivanovna, in the village of Alexandrovskoye, everyone knew this name. Nomivakina, mathematics teacher, 36 years in school number 2, honorary worker of education, the very one about whom the director said she conflicted with anyone. And here a student, before doing what he did, writes exactly her name. Not parents, not classmates, not someone who might have rejected him. The mathematics teacher. A criminal case was opened the same day under Article 110 regarding the tragedy, and the investigative committee for the Stavropol territory immediately took it under control. Numivakina was called in for questioning. She arrived calm, confident, and said she did not understand why he wrote her name. According to her, there were no conflicts between them. An ordinary student, yes, a C student, yes, sometimes did not do homework. But for something like this, she could not explain. Colleagues stood by her side immediately. Director Tumakova told the press that this was some kind of misunderstanding, and that, probably, he had problems in the family. But the investigation had not only the note. Vanya's phone held something else. Vanya was bid farewell a few days later. The phone remained at home, and no one touched it, but it kept ringing. Someone from acquaintances who did not yet know about what happened. Someone from classmates. Every such call hit the nerves. Marina later told journalists, he called every day. I asked my daughter to turn it off so it wouldn't tear my heart apart. When I hear the ring, I think I need to get Vanya ready for school. But Vanya is gone. And so the daughter took the phone, wanted to simply turn it off, but saw a video file in the gallery and played it. On the screen was Vanya, alive. He looked into the camera and said something calmly, as if explaining. Addressing his parents, the daughter called her mother. Marina looked at the screen and heard her son's voice, the one she had already said goodbye to. He was telling her something important, something he wanted to say before swallowing those substances. The content of this recording would become known later. The investigation attached it to the case files, and in court, it would be analyzed literally word by word. But to understand why a student sat before a camera and recorded a farewell video, one must go back 5 years, to that day when Valentina Ivanovna Neomivakina first entered his class, the year 2003. Vanya Chernikov moves to the 4th grade. He was then at a tender age. It was that year that a new teacher appeared in their class, Valentina Ivanovna Nomivakina, mathematics, and she would lead them further. Not for a year, not for 2, until graduation. So, this was customary in that school. A teacher took a class and led it for years, and this was considered the correct approach. The educator knows every student, sees the dynamics, understands who is capable of what. 5 years. For 5 years, Valentina Ivanovna would see Vanya Chernikov every week. Algebra, geometry, several lessons. For 5 years, she would check his notebooks, give grades, call him to the blackboard, and decide whether he could keep up or not. 5 years is, if you think about it, more than a third of his life at that moment. This is the entire path from a young age to a student who, in a few months, must take exams and decide who to be. Vanya wanted to become a journalist and wrote about it in every essay. For this, he needed to finish 11 grades and enter the journalism faculty. And for this, he first needed to survive the 9th grade and pass mathematics. Parents later recalled that the first years went normally. Grades were average but stable. No complaints, no conflicts. The problems began later, in the 8th grade. 8th grade, then 9th. Mathematics came harder and harder to Vanya. At the same time, he was not a failing student. In other subjects, he had normal grades. Russian, literature, history, everything went smoothly there. He loved to write, and in every essay, there was the same thing. I want to become a journalist, enter the journalism faculty, work with texts, but algebra and geometry, C's, sometimes D's, homework sometimes done, sometimes not. Generally, a common picture for a humanities-minded student for whom numbers are harder than words. There were other C students in the class because mathematics is not the simplest subject. But Valentina Ivanovna, for some reason, chose him. Defective. She said this in front of the whole class. Not in a whisper, not in the corridor. During the lesson, in front of 30 classmates. Notebooks flew at his face. If he wrote something wrong, she threw it back across the entire row. When he could not answer at the blackboard, she demanded he call his parents in front of everyone. Take out the phone, dial right now, let the mother hear what kind of son she has. Vanya endured. His mother later recalled, he never tattled on her. Sometimes he said, "Mom, she picks on me, always finds something to dig at." And that's all. About being called defective in front of everyone. Not a word. About notebooks in the face. Also not a word. He remained silent, but words were not the only thing Valentina Ivanovna used. The investigation would later record this in the dry language of the protocol. Permitted harsh physical measures towards the student, but classmates, when they began to be questioned, told it in much more detail. Rough gestures to the back of the head, for a wrong answer at the blackboard, for an unlearned formula, for a C in a test. The hand flew to the back of the head quickly and habitually, as if it were a normal part of the lesson. And here is what is important to understand. She acted not with a closed fist, but with a palm. But she did it, and she did it in front of the whole class. 30 people watched as the mathematics teacher delivered a blow to their classmate, and they remained silent, because that was how it was established. Because she is a merited educator. Because who would argue with a person who has worked in this school for 36 years and whom everyone is used to perceiving as an indisputable authority. Vanya did not tell his parents about these harsh gestures, nor about the defective label, nor about the notebooks in the face. He remained silent about all of this. Marina and Nikolai Chernikov learned about this only after January 30th, when their son was already gone, when investigators began to question classmates, and when they finally spoke up. So, it turns out that for 5 years, their son went to lessons with a woman who called him defective and used rough physical measures on him. And not once during all this time did he complain. But if Valentina Ivanovna allowed herself such things, then a logical question arises. 36 years in one school, hundreds of students, dozens of graduating classes. Why did no one stop her earlier? 36 years. That is how long Valentina Ivanovna worked at school number 2. And during this time, hundreds of students, dozens of graduating classes, whole generations passed through her hands. She saw how those she once taught brought their own little ones to the 1st grade, the younger ones in the families of her former graduates. And here is what is remarkable. In all these years, there was not a single official complaint, not a single proceeding, not a single case. The prosecutor's office would later record the following in its materials. Neither the class teacher nor the school administration identified the conflict in a timely manner. Measures to protect the student were not taken. And this is, perhaps, the key formulation. Not identified, measures not taken. So, Vanya went to her lessons for 5 years, was called defective, had notebooks thrown in his face, endured rough gestures, and all this in front of 30 witnesses. And no one, not a single person, reported this to the director, wrote a statement, or called the district education office. Classmates were silent because that was how it was accepted. Other teachers were silent because they considered it none of their business. Parents of other students were silent because it likely did not concern them. Or it did, but they also preferred not to intervene. But if she allowed herself such things with Vanya, another question arises. There were other C students in the class, others who did not do homework, others who did not keep up with mathematics. Why did he specifically break? Vanya had a goal, and not an abstract one, not from the series to become someone or to settle well, but quite concrete. He wanted to become a journalist. His father later told journalists, Vanya wanted to be a journalist. He wrote about it in every essay. After school, he planned to enter the journalism faculty. And here is what is important to understand. At a young age, he already knew exactly what he wanted: to work with texts, write, tell stories, maybe for a newspaper, maybe for television. He did not specify, but the direction was absolutely clear to him. For this, there was a clear route that was understandable and achievable. Finish the 9th grade, move to the 10th, then to the 11th, get a certificate, and apply to the journalism faculty. But in this scheme, there was one mandatory point: exams. including mathematics, the very subject that he struggled with, and the very subject that Valentina Ivanovna taught. So, to get into the 10th grade, he needed to pass through her grades, through her decision on whether he could keep up or not. Vanya understood this perfectly, and she understood it too. Nikolai Chernikov would later say to journalists with bitterness, "How does she know he won't pass?" Valentina Ivanovna knew about his dream, and as would later become clear from the case materials, she used this dream against him. Classmates later told investigators, recently, she very often repeated to Vanya, "You know nothing, you won't pass the exam." And this was not once, not in a private conversation. She said this in front of the whole class, regularly, lesson after lesson. She knew perfectly well that he wanted to become a journalist, and that for this he needed the 10th grade. And so, understanding all this, she methodically and publicly drove one single thought into him: "You will not pass." Before the winter holidays, she called his mother to school. Marina came and saw a scene she remembered forever. Vanya sat at a desk, and the teacher gave him 15 minutes to learn a theorem. He learned it, went to the blackboard, and proved it. Marina later recalled, "Vanya sits, studies. It is evident that he is uncomfortable in front of the others. But if he is defective, as she says, could he learn a theorem in 15 minutes and prove it on the blackboard? He learned it, he proved it." And Valentina Ivanovna, in response, in front of his mother, in front of the whole class, said, "Do you understand that gray matter dries up if you don't know mathematics? Are you really planning to go to the 10th grade? And what will you do there? You don't know algebra." Marina wanted to flare up, wanted to answer, but remained silent. 9th grade, graduation. If you contradict the teachers, the son will simply be devoured later. From that moment, Vanya stopped going to Valentina Ivanovna's lessons. And then he learned news, which, as it later became clear, turned out to be the last straw for him. After the New Year holidays, Vanya did not return to school. 2 weeks, 14 days, he did not appear in lessons. And the school would later say that he was ill and that a certificate was passed, although parents would remember all this differently. The fact is that shortly before this, Vanya learned news that apparently turned everything upside down for him. Their class, the 9th V, instead of the unified state exam in the Russian language, would take algebra. He knew Russian. Russian came easily to him. Russian was his subject, the subject of a future journalist in which he felt confident. And now, instead of it, algebra. Valentina Ivanovna's subject, the subject about which she had been telling him for years that he was nothing, and the subject that now closed the road to the 10th grade for him. And so, after this, Vanya completely shut down. He had already stopped going to her lessons, even after that incident when his mother was called to school and she saw everything with her own eyes. But now he disconnected completely, stopped calling friends, refused walks, just sat at home. Parents saw that something was happening to him, but he did not speak and continued to endure, as he had endured harsh gestures and the word defective directed at him for 5 years. On January 30th, 2008, Vanya left the house and went to a pharmacy. January 30, morning. Parents leave for work as usual. Marina to the education department accounting. Nikolai to his enterprise. Vanya remains home alone. At some point, he leaves the apartment and goes to the pharmacy, where he buys drotaverine, a common remedy for spasms for stomach pain, which is sold without a prescription and costs pennies. And here is what is important. No one asks why a student needs so many pills, because the drug is considered harmless and is sold freely. He returns home. The apartment is empty, quiet. No one is there. Vanya sits down, takes a piece of paper, and writes several lines in steady handwriting, without blots. He clearly is not rushing and knows exactly what he wants to say. Then he takes the phone, turns on the camera, and records a video message to his parents. And then he consumes the contents, all of them, about 60 pieces. After January 30th, the village of Alexandrovskoye split in two, and these two camps took completely opposite positions. Some said that the teacher ruined the student. 5 years of humiliation, rough gestures, defective, you have no place in the 10th grade. And in the end, he himself named her, both in the note and on video. So what else is needed to understand what happened? Other objected. The family was disadvantaged. The parents were divorcing a couple of years ago. The father, according to rumors, drank. The mother later returned, but relations in the family remained tense. And what does the school have to do with it at all? A local entrepreneur who wished to remain anonymous told journalists, "Vanya didn't have a sweet life. What is there to say?" His parents now have a convenient excuse to shift personal guilt onto the teacher's shoulders. Numivakina's colleagues stood in her defense immediately. An experienced educator, a balanced person, 36 years of impeccable work. This is what they wanted everyone to remember. And here it is important to understand the context. The school had shortly before received a grant of 1,000,000 rubles under the national project Education, and now the teachers were anxiously waiting for a commission from the regional center because a scandal was completely out of place. So then the educators went on the offensive. Students later recalled that if the conversation turned to Vanya and what happened to him, the teachers immediately began to criticize him, criticize the one who was no longer there. But one phrase from the teachers made the parents of other students shudder. Studied poorly, skipped classes, disadvantaged family, parents divorced. It's his own fault. This is what the educators said. And here is what is important to understand. A young student was already resting in the earth, and adults, educators with many years of experience, explained to each other and the students why he himself was to blame for everything. instead of asking themselves the question, how did we allow this? Why did no one notice what was happening all these years? The system turned on defense. Only not the defense of the one who was gone, but the defense of itself. Valentina Ivanovna, meanwhile, went on sick leave because her sugar rose on nervous grounds. Colleagues passed words of support to her. The director continued to repeat to journalists that there were no problems between her and Ivan, and the one who could no longer answer continued to be accused. Vanya's parents initially did not want any trial. They asked for only one thing. Marina and Nikolai Chernikov did not want vengeance. They did not demand prison, did not demand millions in compensation, and did not want to turn what happened to their son into a public show. They asked for only one thing: to dismiss Naomi Vakina from school, so that she could no longer work with students, so that no other student would hear the word defective from her, so that no other mother would find her son on the floor with empty packages nearby. And here is what is important. Initially, the Chernikovs did not even intend to bring the matter to court, because they thought that after everything that happened, it was obvious that the school itself would make a decision, that the system, at least now, when the student is gone, when there is a note with her name, when there is a video message, would take the right step. They were mistaken. The school did not fire Naomi Vakina. Director Tumakova continued to defend her. Colleagues called her a victim of circumstances, and the investigation dragged on month after month without any visible result. So, on September 1st, 2009, a year and a half after Vanya wrote her name in his last note, Valentina Ivanovna Naomi Vakina again entered the class. September 1st, 2009. By this moment, a year and a half had passed since the day Marina Chernikova found her son on the floor. A year and a half of investigation, interrogations, and examinations. A year and a half of waiting for at least some result. And on this day, Valentina Ivanovna Naomi Vakina, as if nothing had happened, went to work. In the same school, in the same office, 2 other students. The criminal case was still ongoing at that moment. Her status was suspect. The preventive measure was an undertaking not to leave. But at the same time, no one forbade her to teach. No one suspended her from office. The director did not fire her. The district education office did not intervene. She simply came on September 1st and began to conduct lessons as if nothing had happened. The same algebra and geometry lessons, the same notebooks that could be thrown in the face, the same rough gestures that could be delivered for a wrong answer. Only now other students sat before her and other parents stood behind them. But the teacher remained the same. So when the Chernikovs learned about this, they finally understood. Nothing could be achieved here by requests. The school does not hear them. The district education office does not hear them. The system protects its own and will protect them to the last. From this moment, they began to write to all instances, to the prosecutor's office, to the ministry, to the regional administration, and to the President of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, the Chernikovs began to write to the prosecutor's office, to the investigative committee, to the Ministry of Education, to the administration of the Stavropol territory, to human rights organizations, and to the President of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev. They wrote everywhere they could turn to and demanded, in essence, one thing: that the case finally reach the court, that the woman who drove their son to what happened on January 30 answer according to the law, and that at least someone in this system admit the obvious. 2 years. 2 years of struggle. 2 years of letters, complaints, and appeals, which, it seemed, went into the void. But gradually the case, nevertheless, began to receive federal resonance. Central media wrote about it, including NTV, Komsomolskaya Pravda, Izvestia, and Gazeta.ru. The story of the student from the village of Alexandrovskoye went beyond the Stavropol territory, and pressure on the system began to increase because ignoring the Chernikovs became increasingly difficult. And finally, the court was appointed, but not in the Alexandrovsky district. The case was transferred to Budyonovsk, 100 kilometers from the scene of events. The reason, as it would later turn out, was simple. A relative of Naomi Vakina worked in the Alexandrovsky district court and in the position of a judge. Budyonovsk district court, 100 kilometers from Alexandrovskoye. The case was transferred here specifically because a relative of the accused worked in the Alexandrovsky district court, and not as an ordinary employee, but in the position of a judge. The process began in the summer of 2009, and on the dock was Valentina Numivakina, 60 years old, honored worker of education, 36 years of teaching experience. More than 30 witnesses passed through the case: students, teachers, parents. And here is what was especially important. Vanya's classmates gave testimony against the teacher who taught them algebra and geometry for 5 years in a row. And now, already in the courtroom, they finally spoke aloud what they had been silent about all these years. The process dragged on. At some point, Numivakina was hospitalized with a pre-infarction condition, and for a month and a half she was undergoing treatment. But the case was not closed. The court waited, so when the defendant returned, the process continued, and on March 23, 2010, the court finally reached a verdict. In her final word, Valentina Numivakina said, the final word, Valentina Numivakina stood before the court and said that she was not guilty. 36 years in school, honorary worker of education, hundreds of students. According to her, she did nothing that other teachers do not do. The student was weak, the family was disadvantaged, the parents divorced, the father drank, and what does she have to do with it at all? According to her version, she herself is the victim. She is being persecuted. She is being pursued. They want to make her guilty of what completely other people are guilty of. She never admitted guilt. The court retired for deliberation, and here was the verdict. guilty. Article 110 regarding the tragedy, and Article 130, Part 2, insult, punishment. 1 year of deprivation of liberty in a settlement colony, plus 2 years of prohibition on pedagogical activity. 1 year for 5 years of humiliation, for harsh gestures to the head, for public insults, for defective and atrophy of gray matter, for a student who dreamed of becoming a journalist and who is no more. The Chernikovs listened to the verdict in silence, but the main question remained, the one that tormented them from the very beginning. Why specifically Vanya? She humiliated others too. Others also studied poorly. Why did he specifically break? And the answer to this question was in that very video that the mother found after the son was bid farewell. Video recording from the phone. The voice of Vanya Chernikov at a young age, the last minutes before leaving. Mom, Dad, I love you very much. I cannot explain why I am taking this step, but Valentina Ivanovna pushed me to it. Mommy, don't deal with her. She is a very bad person. Parents, don't quarrel. I will watch you from there. You look, don't fight. And here it is. The answer to the question we asked throughout this story. Why specifically Vanya? How was he at fault? What did he do to deserve 5 years of humiliation? And he says himself, I cannot explain why I am taking this step. So there was no why. There was no special reason. There was nothing that distinguished him from other students. He simply fell under the hand of a person who, for 36 years, used harsh measures and humiliated those she was supposed to teach and protect. And the system allowed this. Honorary Worker of Education. This awarded a person who used harsh gestures. Colleagues respect her. These colleagues covered up what was happening behind the closed doors of the classroom. By his act, Vanya greatly let down Valentina Ivanovna. This is what teachers said even after he was gone. 1 year of settlement colony. That is the price the system assigned for the fate of a young student. And in his last minutes, he thought not of himself. He thought of his parents, asked them not to quarrel, asked not to take revenge, and said that he would watch them. Vanya Chernikov wanted to become a journalist and dreamed about it from a young age, wrote about it in every essay. He left only one report in his life, a video on a phone and a note of 1 sentence. And this report did what 36 years of silence could not do. It stopped the teacher, not for long,